What up? It's at St. Laurent 57, sober, celibate, and saved. And honestly, I just, um, I just was, in a conversation amongst others, right? And what was crazy to me is judgment. Like, and we all do it. Like, I'm guilty of it all, especially if you have like already a bad feeling or not a good rapport with people. It's almost like every time they say something, you're kind of like ill, right? But anyways, I just got super offended for somebody. They were in the middle of being very vulnerable, and it's supposed to be a safe space and communicating, and in this particular space, all of us have shit going on. All of us, as do everybody in every space that you go to, no matter where you go to, anywhere on this planet. Everyone has shit going on. And but anyways, somebody was being very vulnerable and trying to be positive and looking at the positives of their life. And then somebody had the audacity to be like, well, aren't you homeless? And it could be a little bit biased because being in a similar space on a regular basis, and being aware of, everybody's situation. But I just felt super offended for somebody being in a very positive space, trying to stay positive to keep their momentum, to keep themselves alive. And somebody had the audacity to judge them on, their own communications and, to call them homeless. And I could help myself, but speak up and be like, it's not called homeless. It's referred to as being currently unhoused. You know what I'm saying? And granted, I joke around a lot because that's just part of my personality. That's part of my survival tactic, is before anyone can embarrass me or before anyone can hurt me, I will joke about something and it lightens the load. And, I especially when people are unfamiliar with certain topics, they don't know how to listen to them or understand them, and it makes people uncomfortable. So I might as well just break that uncomfort, right? Might as well break that silence. And I understand people not using the correct vernacular, but for someone to judge another young woman, in their safe space being vulnerable, I couldn't. So it's unhoused, okay? And I absolutely was like, the audacity of you to say this in such, first of all, you're being rude by cutting somebody off. Second of all, you're being judgmental. And part of the feedback guidelines in a safe space are to not have judgment, opinions, give advice, or ask contesting questions. You know what I'm saying? And so, you didn't even wait to ask. It would just, and this is the second time I've noticed this person come at this other individual with a very judgmental, and not even to ask a clarifying question to get a better understanding, but to just purely be judgmental about somebody's situation. And it just really didn't sit with me. So I couldn't help but express that's not what you say. You know what I'm saying? And this girl is young and had a hard time and on her own, no family. So you know what? Shit. I wouldn't even say that, it's not for me to say, but for, unhoused isn't even the right word. I am 36 years old. I got 10 plus years on the girl and literally lost everything. Not saying that it's worse, but I'm just saying, when you're that age and can stay here for a moment, it's still hard. There's no comparison, and there's not one that's worse than the other. But I just feel so wrong to, this young girl is just in a season, and she's young and she's working and she's doing the best that she can to survive and to, still want to wake up and see the day. And sometimes that's the challenge on a regular basis, is not wanting to wake up. not wanting to see that day, not being able to stay in a positive space so that you can get past the trials and tribulations, so you can get past the barriers, you can get past the obstacles and stay positive so that you actually want to live for the rest of the day, or you even want to live to wake up to that day. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes like we all wake up and like we got things going on, right? But for some people, like waking up and be able to look at the positive, because if they don't look at the positive, they literally don't want to live. That's something else. You know what I'm saying? That's a fight that I have yet to know. I've definitely been close, and I've had similar thoughts in that, in that way, right? Like throughout life, there were times, but I don't think there's really ever been a time in my life where I sincerely would wake up and be like, I don't know if I really want to see the rest of this day. And for some people, that is very, very real. And that is something that they have to survive and overcome every single day, the moment that they open their eyes, if they're deciding whether or not they care to see that day. And so, but tonight's class was like really good. I really love this this instructor that we have right now. She's not new to the game, but she's new to us, and I really enjoy her. Because it's really great to have different facilitators to reveal this information, like from different perspectives. You know what I'm saying? Like I absolutely love my original facilitators. Like every time I'm going through something, like his voice pops in my head, just because like, he's been doing this for a very long time, you can tell. But something that the facilitator had shared today was like talking about how like words are programming, and it's kind of like what I was talking about like how, when someone was using, the word homeless, and she was using it in a violent way because she was attacking somebody by, the stigma of her being, in whatever space, in whatever season of her life she's in. And but it's like, when she mentioned how words are programming, it's the same thing like when they tell you about how you have to have positive self-talk. Because like if you keep telling yourself you're fat and ugly, then you're, you know what I'm saying? Like it hurts. You're using violence on yourself. You know what I'm saying? And I have to get better about some of the words I use. But like I said, one of my survival tactics, or not my tactic, but one of my survival coping skills is like humor. You know what I mean? It allows me to like not process, and it allows me to shield myself, but it also doesn't cause waves, right? And it allows me to protect myself from other people who might use might use words against me and hurt me. But at the same time, it doesn't allow me to advocate for myself when I do use humor in some situations, because then like I'm not speaking out. I'm kind of like turning these into a joke and just letting it go. You know what I'm saying? And so, but we were talking about something today, and just the words, right? And it starts in the home. Something she always says is it starts in the home. And it's true, because, we're talking about the types of violence. So you got emotional violence, which is 75%. You got verbal violence, which is 20%. And the 5% is accumulative of physical violence, physical around, so like banging drawers and shit like that, right? And physical direct, which is actually like making physical contact. And then there's sexual, which is like cheating. Cheating is also a form of sexual violence. Withholding sex when you're doing it to harm somebody, not to protect yourself or because, no is a complete sentence, but, and then also homicide, suicide, death, and, someone was like, isn't sexual violence, like, shouldn't that be a higher percentage? And it's not, because before somebody starts cheating on you or withholding sex or, making you engage in sexual activity that you don't agree to, you have already broke the threshold of emotional to verbal to get somebody, to honestly to groom someone. And that's why that 75% of violence is from emotional and verbal, because most of us who continue to be in unhealthy relationships and continue, and not even just intimate relationships, but continue to be in unhealthy relationships with family or friends or people, right? Or people, and when we don't know how to stand up for ourselves, that 75% is a buildup. It's a buildup of the way people use words as violence against us. It's a way for people like to coerce us in certain ways. It's a way for people to minimize and honestly, and then we obviously internalize it, right? But just saying like the types of violence that we endure, right, before we get to the point where we blow up. But the point is too is like, if you grow up in a home where there's violence, whether it's emotional violence, like watching people fight, watching people use words as weapon, watching people, groom people, watching people belittle people and use emotional violence. So like, um, it's hard to explain in such a short time, but emotional violence goes hand in hand with what we call STEM. So emotional violence is when you're taking advantage of someone's space, their time, their energy, and their materials, right? So all those like mind games and things like that where they're hurting you, and that's what they call the invisible bruises from emotional violence, right? And then there's verbal violence, which is obvious, like people using words to hurt you. And, it's when they're trivializing and thingifying and threatening. You know what I'm saying? And so it's crazy that it's just so crazy to me, because I thought to myself in that moment when she said how words are programming, and when someone made the comment about how them assuming that isn't sexual violence like the most, but it's not. It's because we endure so much emotional and verbal violence in the physical violence before, and it doesn't matter the sexual, because the physical and the sexual and the homicide, suicide, death are all in the same bracket, right? The 5%. So, but we endure so much emotional and verbal violence before they start cheating. You know what I'm saying? They had to groom us first, and even if that person, and I mean, this person's behaviors have been intact in them for who knows how long, right? So they're already used to talking to people certain ways and abusing people in certain ways and using violence to get what they want in their relationships, right? And for them to get you to react and behave the way that they want you to, so they can continue their violent behavior. But that's the thing, is like, we are already groomed at and we already make excuses for emotional and verbal violence before we even get to a point in life where we are literally even have the self-awareness to advocate for ourselves, to protect ourselves, to have proper proper communication and healthy skills, because who knows how long we've been enduring emotional and verbal violence while we were growing up, like in the home. You know what I'm saying? So it was just interesting to be in the class and for her to say that, because it really was impactful to me, because sometimes I think about all the stuff that has gone on and whatnot, and when I think about how so many people that I grew up with misunderstand me and misjudge me because how my life is so different to theirs, but yet they were part of that grooming process to make me accept emotional and verbal violence. And all I did is took the only self-awareness I knew around survival and around trying to make myself comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and all I did was take that and I took it into my adult life, into my own home that I created, and into my own relationships and things like that. So it's like I was groomed before I even had a chance. I didn't get to make up my own core beliefs because they were already developed in the home. And so that's what it was so interesting for her to say that, because it just clicked. And I was like, it's so crazy how I get labeled the black sheep and how I get belittled for, being in and out of addiction, or the fact that I was an addict or am, right? And the fact that I get belittled and get treated differently because I've been in domestic violence relationships, or because I don't pick good partners, because I didn't pick partners that were up to certain standards of like family members, right? And it's crazy how like I get judged so harshly and people treat me different and like alienate me based off of judgments of when it's like I learned that before I even had a chance to even, you know what I'm saying? Like to even have that self-awareness and the knowledge to be able to know like what is healthy and what's not. Like what's groomed. Like there's things that I grew up with that groomed me to be this way. Like, having adults in the home be like emotionally violent and verbally violent. You know what I'm saying? That created invisible bruises a very, very long time ago. And because of my lack of healthy, like, lack of a healthy family environment, I ended up just choosing and engaging and allowing a lot of fucked up shit. So that was super eye-opening for me in class today. And I'm just really grateful for this class, because it's just like, because it makes me aware, and it makes me know, like,
bedtime, guys.
It allows me to like see, like, allows me to see some of the things that, maybe my kids have developed core beliefs around the way that they, like how they try to find comfort in discomfort, like in uncomfortable situations. How, like, what does survival mode look like for my kids now, based off of, whether it's my environment, when I was with their dads, when I wasn't with their dads, when their dads were with other people, when, when they're struggling, when I was struggling, when I was with people who were unhealthy. You know what I'm saying? And it just makes me think of like how there are core beliefs that they don't have the awareness of, right? And so that they will probably, they'll do what I did. They'll disguise that they're okay when they're not okay, because they don't know any different, except for the fact that like sometimes it might make them have certain emotions that are uncomfortable, and it won't be until like they progressively get out into the world and start engaging, and when certain situations come up and it triggers their emotions that are relatable to, adverse childhood experiences, and then the tape will play again and the cycle continues to go on. So it just was like it was really good to just have that information, because it just is so like eye-opening, because it's not like I'm choosing. It's not like I am at my most healthiest self with the complete full self-awareness of how like choosing violence. It was like these were things that were instilled in me at a very young age, and I had to cope around them, and I had to make myself comfortable in those uncomfortable situations, and I had to find excuses of why some of these behaviors and these things were acceptable for me to tolerate and for me to endure in order for me to get through childhood to become an adult. So yeah, she's a really good facilitator, and so no matter the circumstance, like, I'm pretty grateful for this class, because it brings a lot of self-awareness. And like I said, I would rather have self-awareness and emotional intelligence than, you know what I'm saying, to go throughout life thinking like things are okay when they're not, even when I'm doing things that are not okay, and just saying that they are. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, I think that everybody should take that fucking class, because everybody, inflicts violence on themselves and on other people, even if they're not conscious of it, right? Because it takes a lot of work to get to that point where you're conscious of exactly what you're doing. It's not an excuse, but it's just a fact.